it started with a single phone call, and today it's a company that connects over 280 million people across Africa and beyond. This is the rise of MTN, a brand built from war zones, politics, and innovation. Born in a new South Africa. It was 1994, a year that rewrote history. South Africa was waking up from the nightmare of apartheid. Nelson Mandela had just become president, and hope was alive in the streets. But while the country was healing from decades of division, another revolution was quietly beginning. One that would change how Africa connects forever. In this fragile new democracy, a company was born, the mobile telephone network. Most people simply call it MTN. At the time, mobile phones were rare, bulky, and mostly useless across much of Africa. The idea that one day every rural village, every city, every person, even the poorest, would hold a mobile device in their hands seemed like science fiction. But MTN had a vision: to bring communication to the disconnected, to create a network that transcended borders. Starting from Johannesburg, MTN launched its operations just as South Africa began opening up to the world. It was risky. Infrastructure was weak, landlines were broken, and telecoms were expensive. But MTN didn't see obstacles. It saw opportunity. The company's early strategy was simple but powerful. Invest in building strong networks and focus on underserved markets. While other companies hesitated, MTN leaned into the chaos of change. They laid towers. They formed partnerships. They hustled. By 1997, MTN had already become a strong player in South Africa, but its ambitions were bigger. It wasn't just trying to be a national company. MTN wanted to become Africa's voice. And so, with the fires of a new democracy still burning bright, MTN prepared to expand beyond borders, to become something greater than anyone expected. This is how Africa's telecom giant was born, not in peace and comfort, but in transformation and uncertainty. It was only the beginning. The bold move into Nigeria. If South Africa was MTN's birthplace, Nigeria was its battlefield. The year was 2001, and Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, was chaotic, corrupt, and politically unstable. Military rule had only just ended. The streets buzzed with tension, and the telecom landscape was a disaster. But where others saw danger, MTN saw destiny. At the time, Nigeria had more than 100 million people, but fewer than 500,000 active phone lines. Most Nigerians had never made a mobile phone call in their lives. It was one of the largest untapped telecom markets in the world, but entering it would be like walking into a storm. MTN paid $285 million for a mobile license in Nigeria, a staggering sum at the time. Many called it reckless. Critics said the company was throwing money into a black hole. But MTN had a plan and nerves of steel. They didn't wait. Within 3 months, MTN set up its first cell sites and rolled out its network in Lagos. Lines began to form outside MTN service centers. Phones were expensive. The signal was weak. But for the first time in Nigerian history, people were making mobile calls on a private network. For millions, it felt like a miracle. And then came the explosion. Demand surged. Nigerians rushed to join the network. MTN scaled faster than anyone thought possible, launching services in Abuja, Port Harcourt, and beyond. In a country where landlines were a luxury, MTN gave people the power of instant connection. By 2004, just 3 years after entering the market, MTN Nigeria had already connected over 4 million subscribers. That number would grow to over 70 million in the next decade. But success came with risks. MTN staff worked under military escort in conflict zones. Armed robbery, sabotage, and political interference became part of daily operations. Yet the company kept building, kept expanding, kept believing. MTN didn't just survive Nigeria, it conquered it. And in doing so, it unlocked a new chapter in African business history. Nigeria wasn't just MTN's biggest risk, it became its greatest reward. Everywhere you go. By the mid-2000s, MTN was no longer just a South African company. It was becoming a continental force. The brand had found its rhythm, its power, and most of all, its identity. And then came the phrase that would echo across cities, towns, and remote villages in Africa. Everywhere you go. More than a slogan, it was a promise. MTN wasn't just selling telecom services, it was selling possibility. Whether you were in Lagos or Lesotho, Ghana or Guinea-Bissau, MTN wanted to be with you, always connected, always available. This wasn't luck, it was strategy. MTN took on one of the most difficult business terrains on Earth, operating in dozens of countries, often with unstable governments, unreliable electricity, and poor infrastructure. But instead of waiting for conditions to improve, MTN built the conditions itself. They invested in cell towers, undersea cables, and network grids. They hired local staff, trained engineers, and created customer service centers where none had existed before. They partnered with local leaders to gain trust. In many places, MTN became the first experience people had with a large, reliable corporation. It became more than a company. It became a symbol of progress. Children studied under streetlights powered by MTN towers. Farmers checked market prices on phones connected through MTN data. Families separated by borders and war could finally hear each other's voices. MTN didn't just sell SIM cards, it sold connection, and with it, a sense of belonging to the modern world. By 2010, MTN had reached over 120 million subscribers across 21 countries. Its yellow and black colors became a familiar sight, painted on buildings, buses, umbrellas, and football jerseys. MTN even became a major sponsor of the FIFA World Cup in South Africa, the first ever held on African soil. Everywhere you go. It was no longer a campaign, it was a reality. But as MTN's empire expanded, so did the scrutiny, and ahead, storm clouds were gathering. Crisis and conflict. For more than a decade, MTN had been unstoppable, growing faster than any telecom brand in Africa's history. But empires don't rise without resistance, and MTN's came in the form of one of the biggest financial penalties ever handed down in the telecom world. The year was 2015. Nigeria's government dropped a bombshell, a $5.2 billion fine against MTN for failing to disconnect unregistered SIM cards. To the outside world, it seemed simple, a technical mistake. But in Nigeria, where terrorism and insecurity were on the rise, SIM registration was tied to national safety. And MTN, the largest telecom in the country, had allegedly failed to comply with critical security regulations. The fallout was immediate. MTN's stock price plunged, executives resigned, investors panicked. Behind the scenes, negotiations were tense. MTN pushed back, arguing that the fine was excessive and politically motivated. Nigeria's regulatory body stood its ground. Eventually, after months of back and forth, the fine was reduced to $1.7 billion. Still a staggering blow. But the crisis didn't stop there. In 2018, Nigeria again accused MTN, this time of illegally repatriating $8.1 billion in profits. A separate tax dispute added another $2 billion in claims. Suddenly, MTN wasn't just fighting business battles. It was fighting for survival in its largest market. Some said it was political revenge. Others called it business bullying. But one thing was clear. MTN had become too big to ignore. Across Africa, people watched, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. Was this the cost of success? Had MTN grown so large that it had become a target, not just for governments, but for public frustration? Yet through it all, the network didn't fall. MTN paid the fines, settled the cases, and kept building. Where other corporations would have collapsed under the weight of scandal, MTN emerged, bruised, but not broken. The crisis revealed something deeper. MTN was no longer just a telecom company. It was now a geopolitical force. And in a continent changing fast, the company had to evolve or be left behind. Reinventing the game. When you've already connected hundreds of millions of people, what's next? For MTN, the answer was clear. Don't just connect Africa, empower it. After years of political heat and regulatory fire, MTN emerged with a new mission. It wasn't enough to provide calls and texts. The future was data. The future was money. The future was digital. And MTN was ready to lead that future. The shift began with MTN Mobile Money, or MoMo, as it's known across the continent. In countries where banks were unreachable and cash was king, MTN turned basic phones into digital wallets. Suddenly, a market trader in Ghana or a motorcyclist in Uganda could send, receive, and store money, all without needing a traditional bank account. Africa had millions of unbanked citizens. MoMo gave them financial identity. Within a few years, MTN Mobile Money had over 60 million active users, processing billions of dollars in transactions each month. In many countries, it became more trusted than banks. But the reinvention didn't stop there. MTN invested heavily in internet infrastructure, expanding 4G coverage and laying the groundwork for 5G in key cities. It launched music streaming platforms, e-learning partnerships, data bundles for students, and even flirted with blockchain services. The goal was clear. MTN no longer wanted to be seen as just a phone company. It wanted to be Africa's digital heartbeat, an ecosystem for life, learning, entertainment, and finance. And then came the boldest move yet. The creation of MTN Group Fintech, a subsidiary designed to rival banks. MTN wasn't just handling mobile money anymore. It was entering the world of loans, insurance, and investment products, all through the phone. In 2022, MTN spun off its fintech unit, valuing it at over $5 billion, with ambitions to list it publicly. In a world racing toward digital inclusion, MTN wasn't following the trend. It was leading it. From towers to transactions, from calls to capital, MTN had reinvented itself, not just as a telecom, but as a platform for Africa's digital revolution. And the best part? They were just getting started. The legacy and future of MTN. In just 3 decades, MTN went from a small telecom startup in post-apartheid South Africa to a pan-African digital empire. From war zones to remote villages, from basic cell phones to mobile banks, MTN didn't just grow with Africa, it helped shape Africa's future. Today, the numbers are staggering. Over 290 million subscribers, operations in more than 20 countries, billions in annual revenue. and a name recognized by nearly every household on the continent. But MTN's legacy goes beyond business metrics. For many Africans, MTN was the first connection to the outside world, the first phone call to a loved one abroad, the first bank account in the palm of a hand, the first chance to learn, earn, and grow, all through a device they could carry in their pocket. It became more than a brand. It became a bridge. And yet, the road ahead won't be easy. As Africa's digital economy explodes, so does competition. Local startups, global tech giants, government-run platforms all want a piece of the pie. Regulations are tightening, consumer expectations are rising. The next battle will be over data, privacy, speed, and trust. MTN will need to keep evolving, not just to survive, but to lead. That means deeper investments in AI, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and education. It means building not just for profit, but for purpose. The company's new slogan says it all. Africa's time is now. And MTN wants to be the one holding the clock. Will it succeed? Time will tell, but one thing is certain. No story about Africa's rise, its resilience, and its digital future is complete without MTN. From connection to transformation, this is the legacy of MTN.